childhood up, we have had to conform to a certain social game. And so we're in a constant state of competition. Good assistance, secret. You can't make a mistake.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Friends of Failure. My name is Sam, and this is my co-host, Megan.
Heyo.
Hey, I would like to introduce you to a very special guest today. She is the CEO and founder of MindHatch and is also the author of I Quit, The Life-Affirming Joy of Giving Up. This is Coonoor Behal. How you doing?
Hi, I'm doing great. Yeah, really excited to chat with you both.
Yeah, you have a lot, I think, to talk about that we are very excited to talk about, and it's very fitting for this podcast. I don't even know where to begin, to be honest with you.
I think when we first were in touch, I might have replied with something to the effect of, "Oh my God, I feel like I was grown in a lab to be on your podcast."
I'm pretty sure you did, yeah.
I was like, this is just like me in podcast form.
Yeah, from your book title alone, it was like meant to be.
Yeah.
So which came first, the book or the company?
Well, chronologically, definitely the company came first. But so what I do through my company is like helping companies and organizations create the conditions for innovation and creativity to thrive. So as you might imagine, a lot of my work involves trying to get people comfortable with the idea of failure and failing productively, and that failure is a sign that you're learning on the path toward innovation, right? And but you know, the kernel of the idea for the book happened very quickly after I founded MindHatch, because I was going on a lot of like aimless business meetings with a new entrepreneur who had no idea what she was doing, and was just kind of taking coffee chats with anyone who would listen. And I was on the East Coast at the time, and so really like kind of the habit is that you sit down for coffee and they're like, "Hi, let's like recite our resumes at each other," you know. And I found myself in those conversations being like, "Oh, wait, like stop there, like go back and tell me why you left that college without finishing, or go back and tell me why did you leave that city, why did you leave that job," you know. And I found myself being really interested in people's quitting stories, and like more interested in that than really anything else. And I found I could really like make a connection with people really quickly by like asking them about their quitting stories and asking that very deceptively simple question of why. And so that was really kind of the genesis of me learning that I really liked quitting stories, you know, and like and definitely the kernel of the idea for what would become the book, you know, which was is an encapsulation of my own evolving love for quitting and failure and being a reformed perfectionist, and also my love for other people's quitting stories.
I love that. It's super strange, you know, whenever you start having that mindset, right, of quitting isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? Like nobody likes quitters, but some things aren't meant for everyone.
You
right?
have to quit or you're gonna beat your head against a wall for a long time.
Totally. Yeah. And for me, it's like, I mean, we can talk for hours about toxic positivity, right?
Yeah.
In so many aspects of life. But just like in researching the book, I was like getting reacquainted with like all these toxic phrases, like quitters never win and winners never quit, you know. And you're just like, that is garbage, you know. Like that is like a horrible way to like live your life, you know. And I think like you know, when I was interviewing people about their quitting stories for the book, you know, like this common phrase kept coming up of like, "Oh, this was no longer serving me. This was no longer serving me." And I think in that, embedded in that phrase is that, well, at one time it was serving you, you know, but people and circumstances and desires and values evolve over time. So just because you made a decision 10 years ago and it was the right decision then doesn't mean it has to continue to be the right decision, you know? And so I think a lot of people get tripped up because they think like, oh, if I don't stay committed to the decision I made, then I'm failing. But it's like, no, you're just doing what's required of innovation, which is like you're processing new information that you didn't have at the time, and you're making a different choice.
Yeah.
And that's very positive.
Yeah, part of it is
100%.
adapting, right? It can't be stagnant because life isn't a stagnant thing.
Yeah, for sure. Like you are
I
not a stagnant being, and your world is not a stagnant thing. And yeah.
I bet you got a lot of people where you ask them, hey, wait a second, like, why did you quit this? And they kind of like stopped and went, why did I quit that? Right.
Yeah.
I think sometimes that does happen until someone kind of presents it to them maybe differently, right?
Definitely.
I'm sure that's happened to me several times, right? So I just recently entered, well, I guess not recently because I'm 33 now, but like I look at my 20s a lot differently than when I was in them.
Yeah.
And hindsight is always a little bit more, I mean, it can be a little more gentle in terms of like the criticisms that I have for myself because I have grown and learned, right? But I don't look at things negatively anymore when I look back and it's like, hey, I quit them for a reason.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I am very ungentle when I look back on my 20s. My 20s sucked. Oh my God. Like I thought the 20s were gonna be like the greatest decade ever. Like when I was 18, I thought 22 was like gonna be the best age. I couldn't wait to be 22. 22 was the worst year of my life.
Oh no.
But then like the rest of my 20s were really, I mean, I referenced it earlier. It was a lot of transition, a lot of not knowing where in the world to live, what to do, what to focus on, and which, you know, is not inherently bad. But I think my 20s sucked because it was when I was kind of like unraveling this perception of myself as someone who was good at everything, did quote unquote the right thing that other people felt were the right thing, you know, and it took me my 20s to kind of really just say, fuck that, you know, and like that's not working for me. And that's not really like the whole kind of adage of like hard work always pays off. My 20s were about learning that that is false, you know, and kind of re-understand, okay, what am I working hard for and the why and what are my values and, you know, that sort of thing. So 20s sucked because, you know, you're poor in your 20s and you also don't know what the hell you're doing. And so I think by the time I was 25, I like could not wait to be 30. I was like, let's just get this decade over with. I'm done with it. Yeah.
I feel that. I spent a lot of my time in my 20s, you know, my mentality was based on how I grew up and the people I watched. It was just you go to work, you work really hard, and you just keep grinding, right? And there was never like, why am I doing this or what am I even doing it for? It was just do it, like go and work really hard. So I got really good at working hard, but it was just kind of like directionless, right? Yeah, and it's weird because one day you go, wait a minute, like I was just kind of going right without a purpose, and then you go, well, like what's my purpose? And then it all starts to unravel to like, who am I, you know, what is all of this, you know?
Yeah, definitely. I think for me it was like, I think that like working hard at everything, because that's what you should do, you should try to excel in whatever you're doing. I think that worked really well for me when I was in a school environment, you know, and I think that's why I didn't call bullshit on it until I was like out of school, right? Because I was like a perfectionist. I was a high achieving achiever. You know, I wanted to be involved in things. I cared about being good at the things that I committed to, you know, and those aren't bad characteristics, right? But I think I got the shock of my life when I entered the workforce for the first time after graduate school. And the shock of my life was like, oh my God, this is not a meritocracy, you know? And like where school, at least for me, felt meritocratic, you know, where hard work did pay off, you know, and yes, I would work hard at things that I knew I was not going to make my life. You know, I worked real hard at calculus to get a B, really hard, you know, but that's what you do when you're in high school, you know, and so then, you know, entering the workforce, I think was really what, you know, like changed my mind about all of the way I thought I would pursue my life. Yeah.
It forced you to like adapt.
I think the transition too in between graduating, whether it's high school, college, master's, and then here's your entry level job or whatever is your first, you know, step in the door. it's never what you expect. It's
Yeah.
never, you're like, I did it. I achieved all the things. I got my diploma. Oh, this is what I did all that for. And now I have to make sure this is right. Or do I quit this? Do I not? Yeah, it's a very hard transition period.
Yeah. And I don't think I ever had a problem with like entry level work. Like to this day, the best job I ever had was as an unpaid errand running intern on Late Night with Conan O'Brien in college.
That's awesome.
Like it was the best. I got paid nothing. I got a free Metro card, but it was amazing, you know? And so I'm not beyond grunt work, you know, and enjoying that. But I think for me, it was less about like the day-to-day work, and it was about the values. It was about the culture. It was about, am I having an impact, you know, large or small? Am I being respected, or are they just assuming that because I'm getting paid crap and being treated like crap, that I'm just going to quit in 2 years anyway. So they're not going to change anything about how they treat their workers, you know? And so it was less about like, I was definitely willing to earn my dues. Absolutely. You know? But it was more about those deeper kind of like values things like, oh, wow. Like, am I willing to put up with things like sexual harassment and organizational dysfunction to do this? And the answer was no, you know, and you know, I just really refined what my trade-offs were and learned a lot about what I was willing to put up with and not willing to put up with. And that's actually a question I asked all of the happy quitters for my book. The last question was, you know, what were you not willing to put up with? You know, and
I think that's a good point too. Of when I was younger, I didn't really have an understanding of creating boundaries, right? Or like, hey, what was the line, right? Of at what point do you go, okay, it's like, I don't care how much money you're paying me, right? And and it's super interesting because, like, you know, you take like a large sum of money, like whether it's $1 million or 100 gazillion dollars, right? And it's like, what would you be willing to do for that? But like a lot of people, as they really try to discover themselves, right, or they're going through the ringer or they're in the trenches, they start to go like, wait a second, like my life has value, right? Like me as a person has value outside of just working for money, right? So I'm trying to like put things in order in my head, I guess. So you know, you did like an internship, you did all your schooling, right? And then at some point you were like, hey, you know what, like I'm going to create this company, right? So I mean, do you remember going, hey, I'm doing this, or did it just start to kind of happen and you're like, okay, I'm going to run with it?
I think kind of both. So like perception is different from reality, right? I think so my perception at the time when I had like the final straw at my previous company, I'd had like the final straw of like, I cannot let other people toy with my livelihood any longer, you know? And it was an instance where like I was still that kind of like do-gooder, like rule follower, like just tell me what to do and I will do it well, you know? And I was the kind of like, you tell me how to jump, like I'll ask you how high, you know? But it was a kind of a position of where like they told me to jump, I jumped high, but then they were like, oh, we would have preferred if you ran around the block. You know, so it was just really just like pulling out the rug from underneath you, like right and left. And I was like fed up, you know? And so my perception was like, oh my God, I want to quit this stable job and instead of found my own company. How reckless and impulsive am I being? You know, but you know, my then boyfriend, now ex-husband, it was he who was like, well, Coonoor, you've actually been kind of talking about this for like 6 months. And I was like, oh yeah, you're right. Maybe I'm not being as impulsive as I thought I was being, you know? And so
it just feels scary. Yeah.
Yeah. It just kind of felt like, oh, I'm going to quit another career, you know, like what's wrong with me, you know, that I want to do this. And, but yeah. And so that was kind of like that moment of just being like, oh, I'm not willing to let another company toy with my livelihood. I'm not willing to, it really was like the only way I could work in a meritocracy was to work for myself, you know, and so that was kind of like half of the reasoning. The other half was I just wanted to do what I loved, you know, and I couldn't do that where I was. I tried. Oh my God, I tried so hard to find a pocket where I could like exist doing the things I do through Mind Hatch now, but it just wasn't there. So it was almost a little bit of a non-choice where if I were going to do the things that I loved, I'd have to do it on my own because it really didn't exist anywhere else.
Mhm.
Mm.
I am a personal trainer, right? And
Oh,
at one
nice.
point, yeah, at one point in time, there was that thing bouncing around in my head, right? And we've all heard it. And I think there is some kind of truth to it, but the whole thing of if you love what you're doing, you never work a day in your life.
Yeah.
But I'm like,
yeah.
because I'm like, okay, think about those people that their hobby is they love to cycle, right? And they're putting in 30 miles in a bike ride. That wasn't easy peasy because they enjoyed doing it, right? Like they put in the work and that's what they're passionate about. And so with personal training, I was trying to find like take something I'm very passionate about, which is exercise and like, the physical work of health, right? And share that with people. But like you have to put in work to do that for other people, right? Like you're very passionate about what you do, but I'm sure sometimes it can be a difficult task to help people change how they view things, right? Like we get stuck in our ways so easily. And then you're like, well, hey, what if you do this? And people are like, no. And it's like you're like you asked for my help and they're like, I don't care, no. And you're like,
impossible. Yeah.
Right. Like let me try to walk each other through this, right? And so I had a feeling you would probably agree with me, right? Like just because you're passionate about it doesn't mean there's not a lot of hard work involved, right?
Yeah, I think also just because it's hard work doesn't mean you can't love it.
Yeah.
Right.
I think the inverse is also true, and I think embedded in that phrase, I'm not a fan of anything that you can stitch on a pillow.
It's a good rule.
Live, laugh, love, baby.
Yeah, it's like anything your grandmother would cross stitch on a pillow, don't do in your life.
Yeah.
And so it's too easy, to be meaningful. And so I feel that way about this phrase too, because it's just like you can love your work, you can work your love, you can separate your work and your life, you can combine your work and your life. It's up to you, and but I definitely have had that kind of feeling of like that like separation. Do I want that separation? I started performing improv comedy and teaching improv comedy a few years before I founded Mind Hatch and made improv in the workplace kind of part of my business. And in the early years, I did have this kind of like crisis of like, oh, am I selling out? Am I like dishonoring the performance art form of improv by like, taking it into corporate environments, and so I had this kind of battle of like, am I somehow poisoning this thing that I love as like a passion and a hobby that has no capitalistic attachments to it, and by using that skill for like capitalist goals, like, earning revenue for my company, and I got over it, but there were times where I was like, "Ooh, am I poisoning one well, with the other, and I've learned that like doing one strengthens the other, And so, but yeah, I think that's an example of me turning something I loved into something that is also work that I love. Yeah, yeah.
I have a fail story that I guess I'm going to share with you guys. So there was this like several people in my life who were like, man, you're funny. Like maybe you could like take this and like share it with people. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I do. Like when I'm talking to people, I'm just goofy, like whatever. And they're like, no, like go get on stage and do like stand-up comedy. And I'm like, man, I do enjoy stand-up comedy. Like that would be funny, right? Like go and da-da-da. So like I had found a place locally. This was a few years back. And like, I was like, hey, if you want to come up here and it's open mic, like just sign up, let us know, and we'll tell you a time and you'll go up there. And, I had a couple of jokes in my head, but I went on stage at like midnight. There was 3 other people in the building because everybody else had left. And I just bombed it. All I can remember is I'm staring at this giant spotlight. I can't see anything else other than just bright light and that feeling of like panic, like stage fright. And I tried twice and never went back. Like I think about it a lot, but improv is another thing that I just absolutely love to like watch and like even talk about, even though I've never done improv. But that's that one thing where it's like it felt like the one that got away, like the comedy got away from me. but
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe one day I'm gonna give it another go. I don't know.
Well, my first bad quit, it was very similar. I mentioned I interned at late night with Conan O'Brien in college. And because of that, I got really acclimated to like improv. You know, I'd go to Upright Citizens Brigade every weekend to watch shows, and I was watching and consuming a lot of improv. And then someone at the show encouraged me to sign up for a class, and I was like, yeah, why not? You know, and I went to the very first class, and I got so scared of being bad at this thing. So this is my still like perfectionist 20-year-old, you know, used to be good at everything, want to be good at everything I try. And I paid for an 8-week class. I went to the first class and I never went back. I just ditched.
Wow.
Yeah, because I was, in hindsight, I was too scared to learn that I might be bad at something.
Yeah.
If I'd gone to just like one more class, I would have learned like, oh yeah, people suck at this for like a decade before.
Yeah. Exactly. I was about to say, it's one of those things. It's a lot of creative like art forms. You're going to be bad for a while. Like it's just how it goes. You have to build the muscle and the skill. And it's especially hard when it's a performance art like that, because people are watching you be bad.
Yeah.
There's no way around it, because you have to get used to
that
it.
journey.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So Sam, like I unquit that quit like 8 years later, you know, when I harbored this like regret for like 8 years, you know, and I was like, oh, I got to do it, you know, and I signed up for a class, and I had no intention of even performing in the class showcase. And then, and then like, you know, long story short, I got addicted to it. Like 10 years later, you know, I still do it every week, you know, and so you can always go back. You can always undo a regret. That's what I feel. Yeah.
See, Sam, you got to just go back and do it. Write a whole stand-up special.
So here's the thing that's also funny. I had a friend who he recommended a book, the Psychology of Money. And I'm like, you know, touching base with him because I'm reading a little bit every day, right? And he goes, "Did you get to the part about Chris Rock?" And I was like, "No." And he kind of explained it a little bit to me. And I go, "Oh no, that's from like another book." And sure enough, he wasn't wrong, and neither was I. I've read 2 books now that have talked about Chris Rock and how people have been interviewed and asked questions where they're like, you know, so, you know, when Chris Rock was doing like the little small comedy clubs, like how was he? And they're like, awful.
Yeah.
Like he was sitting there and he was like, he had a little notebook and he'd be like, "Hey, blah, 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 blah." And then people would be like, "Nah." And he'd be like, "Okay." And he would like mark it off the list. And he would do this, you know, tens of hundreds of times until he was like, "Okay, this is what I'm going to do for like the special." And, you know, I find comfort in that of, you know, if I ever went to pursue comedy, like I am at the bottom of the mountain. I might have dug a little hole and now I'm like in the hole and I got to get out of that and then climb the mountain, just because I had that one bad experience where I'm like, ugh.
Yeah. But it's also okay to not unquit it. You know, if you like try it again, you're like, this isn't for me. Like, that's cool too. You know, like I talked to someone last year, she was interviewing me for a podcast, and it was so funny. I shared the story of me like quitting improv in college, and she was like, "I quit improv in college," but for her, it was, as she said, the greatest fucking decision she ever made in her life. She was like,
it wasn't for her. Yeah.
Never again.
I was so happy to quit. And whereas for me, I had this monkey on my back for like 8 years about it, you know? And so, you know, it's like quitting is such a personal, I mean, that's a big reason why my book is intentionally and dutifully not about how or when or why to quit something, because it's such a personal reflection of your own values, right? And your own trade-offs. Like she and I, same period in our lives, quit something and had totally different takeaways about it. You know, we quit the same thing. So yeah.
I feel that because I mean, as a person who's, you know, you have a book, right? That's not like you didn't sit down and just go, "Okay, here we go," and boom, it's done, right? I mean, that's a lengthy process, right? Because you said you interviewed people and then of course putting it all together and then the editing and the publishing and the right. So whenever I'm sure people ask you that question, right? Of how do you help someone who's like asking the question of like, "I don't know if I'm supposed to quit this thing or not. Like I've been doing it and I'm miserable. or like I'm doing it and I love it, but I'm really bad at it and it's not getting any better. Like, like how are you supposed to help someone with that, right?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like a peer to peer kind of conversation, you know, I've definitely, especially since I came out, like had friends and people like call me up and like, so I'm thinking about doing this, you know. And so I do, even though I'm very pro quitting and I am very passionate about society correcting the wrongs it has pushed on people by having this negative connotation to quitting. I think quitting is brave and courageous and is a way to live your values. It's a one way to live your values. You know, I think you can do things that are just below quitting. You can just test drive something differently. You can pivot. You can just make a different choice. You know, so you can run experiments yourself before you maybe have the confidence to actually quit something. When I say confidence, I mean the confidence that it's the right decision for you, that you're not going to regret it. You know, I'm also a very no regrets person, you know, and so so like I'm not someone who like necessarily is going to just like quit everything for the sake of quitting something. You know, I'm not like a scorched earth kind of person when it comes to my life, you know. Some people are, and that's great. You know, I think that's also very brave, you know. But I think there's a lot of things you can do before making that big, often point of no return kind of quitting decision. You know, I think you can like run a little, I mean, just in case of like, okay, so say you're happy, say you're unhappy in your job, right? It's totally possible, and I've been there, you might feel like you want to quit your job because you hate your coworker, right? But you know, I my hope is that someone will read the book. Maybe they'll use the toolkit I've created to accompany the book, and they will think a bit more reflectively beyond just like the daily annoyance of this one coworker. And maybe they'll look deeper into like, okay, does this job match my values? Right.
Yeah.
And if the answer is yes, maybe then you have that clarity to understand like, okay, this annoying coworker doesn't matter as much because again, I have this purpose, I have this drive, I have this confidence that my choice to stay in this job is a choice, right? And I'm accepting the trade-off of this annoying coworker to be able to like fulfill that choice. And so I think a lot of it is about, you know, quitting is a choice, but so is not quitting. And I think if more of us can conceive of our inaction, our, oh, I'll think about it later, or I'll just keep doing this until something else comes up. You know, if you can think of that as itself a choice, an active choice, you know, you might make different choices, right? Because the decision to not quit is a choice, and you want to make sure that that matches your values and your trade-offs as well.
Yeah.
I've had jobs where, you know, I talk to family or friends and I'm like, I can't do this. And they're like, well, why? And I'm like, as a job, I can obviously do it, but it's like because of these things. And I think it is interesting once you decide in your head of, okay, this isn't my career, this is a means to an end. And you give it like a purpose, right? Like, okay, hey, you need to survive this long doing this, whether it's the coworker or whatever it is. Like working outside is not the greatest thing, but if you have a reason for what you're doing, like I have a friend who, you know, he has you know, several kids, and so for him, you know, on those days where he's like, man, I don't want to do this, it's like, hey, I'm not doing it for me, I'm doing it for the kids. And then all of a sudden it turns into a, okay, I got this, right? It's not about anything other than like achieve the task at hand, right?
Perspective, basically, because sometimes people get so caught in the it's just a black and white situation, there's only this full stop or a full speed ahead, but you can go, oh, maybe I need to change this or change part of my schedule so I'm not always irritated at this time or something like that.
Yeah, or maybe I need to like make a lateral move in the same company. You know, maybe it's not throw the baby out with the bathwater and like place the ground.
Just change departments or something.
Like change the circumstances, change the people. You know, you can like run those little tests to see like if the rot really is organizational for you, you know, or if it's just like something that is changeable, you know, for sure.
Yeah, it's probably a good idea not to get stuck in that like tiny little mindset bubble where you're just like starting to like lose your mind over every little thing because it's just become too much because you waited too long to go, wait a second, like there are options. I I
I
think
think
something
people have
that
a lot more choice than they think they do.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
people get caught up in like the, well, what will people think? You know, and it's like,
Mhm.
who cares? You know, like you have to do what's right for you and right for what you've decided is important. Yeah.
Yeah.
So one thing that's weird to me about failure is, you know, growing up, I never had conversations about it. I never thought about it. There's the famous joke from Talladega Nights, which is the, if you're not first, you're last. But then later in the movie, like the dad's like, hey, what are you talking about? Like you can be anywhere on that spectrum, right? You can be last place and it's fine, right? And
Mhm.
so it was always just like joked about, but then you get older and you go, you know, there's a point there. And I think it's really interesting that for me, I eventually had to admit to myself that there's a such thing as autopilot, and you
Mm.
can easily get stuck in that. And part of that is you start to realize that you're on autopilot, and maybe you don't realize how long you've been on autopilot. But then one day you're thinking about it, you start thinking about these things that you've avoided because it makes you uncomfortable.
Mm.
And you know, I'm sure there's several different sources where you can hear this from, but you should lean into those things that make you uncomfortable because it will make you grow, right?
Yeah.
And so like improv
Mhm.
or like stand-up comedy or whatever it is one thing to go, hey, this makes me uncomfortable, force yourself to do it, and then maybe you fall in love with it and you do it, or it
Mhm.
makes you really uncomfortable and you go, this is a nightmare, this is a bad idea, I'm never
Yeah.
going to do it again, right?
Totally.
And I think that's one thing too, is it forces me to reflect on, hey, I'm only going to be here for X amount of time, and that's the kicker, right? We have no idea how long that's going to be.
Yeah.
And so why not go start your own company? Why not go write that book, right?
Mhm.
Or whatever it is that you're passionate about. um I find it absolutely insane. I mean, I'm a person that I love fitness and I want to share that, but there are people who are going out there and training to do Ironmans or go and do, you know, however far people that cycle go in
Yeah.
competitions, right? Hundreds of miles, and baffles me. But they find that drive and that desire and that passion, and they just go do it because it's like, why wouldn't I go do
Mhm.
what I want, right?
Yeah.
And
Whereas
I
for me,
think that's
it's like, why would I not binge watch all 4 seasons of Cobra Kai in one night?
That's more of me.
That's my endurance. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
my
how is
goal.
that.
I don't want to run that much.
Yeah.
I just imagine like you have 4 TVs set up and each season's playing
Oh
simultaneously,
man, if
like
I
season one.
could just like mainline TV into my veins, I would. Totally. Yeah. Yeah.
What happened to her? She OD'd on Cobra Kai, guys. Like we didn't know it was
Oh,
possible, but
that
it
was a
happened.
noble death. Noble death.
The
Yeah.
best way to go.
Is I have to ask now, is that your favorite TV show?
Oh, don't ask what my favorite TV show is. There's like there's like content overload. There's just too much TV. It is amazing, and I will never watch everything that I want to watch. But of what I've watched in the past year, yes, Cobra Kai is. It is. It. I watched it like New Year's Eve. I had like the best New Year's Eve. It was like, of course, quarantine New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
But what I did was I drank a bottle of champagne and watched Cobra Kai until like 7 o'clock in the morning. And it was the best New Year's Eve ever. And, I
Sounds
ordered
magical.
and I had a bottle of champagne and watched Cobra Kai. And I kid you not, like after every episode of Cobra Kai, I was screaming at the TV and I was screaming, why are you so good? Why are you so good? It has no business being as good as it is. They just like talk about overachieving. It was like it could have been half as good and still enjoyable. It is like it is very, very good. It's high quality. Yeah.
Cobra Kai is from Karate Kid, right?
Yeah.
It's the continuation and it has both of the original guys, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's wild because I remember hearing about Cobra Kai coming out and people are like, yeah, like Karate Kid, but now. And
Yeah.
I was like, what? Like that's never gonna work. And here we are. Apparently there's
Yeah.
4 seasons.
I'd heard about it. And the fifth one's coming out soon. I can't wait. It was on like YouTube Red. And I was like, I'm not gonna pay for another subscription channel. So when it came on Netflix, that's when I finally got around to watching it. But yeah, it's pretty amazing.
It is wild to me how many like subscription services there are now, streaming services, I guess, of like, if I'm sure there's got to be people who are like, I just can't take it. Like, I'm not going to buy 40 different streamings. So they just like, can I just get cable TV? And they're like, actually, no, like that's just the dead zone now. And
It
like,
doesn't exist
right,
anymore.
right. Like you can't go back, guys. It's only streaming services now.
I know. I have never done the cord cutting. I've never quit cable. And I wish I could, but I can't because of live sports. Like
It is
that's
hard. Yeah.
the thing, you know, it's not a really a great way to watch live sports like on a big screen yet. And so just
Yeah. Not legally. No.
yeah.
Right. You're
Yeah.
like just hacking into the mainframe trying to get live sports.
I know. I mean, if I were that good at doing that, I would. I have no problems pirating. But,
That'd be your next book on like, this is how you do it, guys. Like
Yeah,
if you want live sports, this is how it's done, guys.
Yeah.
Pirate Bay, the sequel.
Oh wow.
I also I like tennis. I don't really like a sport that is remotely popular in America. And so it's like, I'm sure there are like streaming platforms for like NFL games, but they're not really for tennis. And I don't want to watch it on like my laptop.
Yeah, it's not the same.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fair. Like, what would be the point, right? You just have to like really stare at it, trying to get it to. I've never been a fan of sports. I've just never got into it. But I have to say some of my best memories about sports is like if you're with someone who's passionate about it, doesn't matter, like hockey, tennis, football, whatever. And like their favorite team is there and they're getting after it and people are like fighting for that win. Whoever you're with that's passionate about that sport will get you going. You don't even have to care, right? Like you can be like, I don't even know who this guy is, but I'm going to cheer him on all the way to the scoring zone or whatever.
Totally. Yeah, I grew up in Ohio, but my ex-husband is from Michigan. So I learned that's like a really big rivalry, like those.
Oh yeah, they will like fight each other. I'm from Ohio. I was born.
Oh,
there.
you are? Wait,
Yeah.
where are you?
Mount Vernon, north of Columbus.
Have
you heard of it? Because it's like a tiny town.
I've been there.
Oh my gosh.
I kind of don't want to admit in the recording why I've been there.
Oh no, you can tell me after. It's fine.
Are you familiar with the junior miss?
Yes, vaguely. Yeah.
The Ohio program takes place in Mount Vernon. That's why I've been there.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
How was that?
It was great. I don't want to talk about it.
We'll leave it there.
Exit the podcast.
And we never saw her again.
Yeah.
We should talk about it afterward, though.
Okay.
That's like a weird niche reason to know Mount Vernon, Ohio. But I'm from Lima, Ohio.
I've heard of it. Yeah.
Like west of Columbus, like by a couple hours. Yeah.
It's wild that Ohio is such a small state, but I meet someone from it like every few weeks. It's insane.
Yes, I agree. Yeah. Are you still in Ohio?
No, in
Okay.
Texas now. Yeah, I left that a long time ago.
Yeah, I also find like easy kindred spirits with other people who have left Ohio. Like we all tend to like get along really well. I feel like it's like we all have our reasons for why we left that state, and they tend to be pretty similar. So yeah.
Yeah.
Is Ohio known for anything?
No.
Like, you know how like if
Amish people, the Buckeye. That's about it.
Terrible football fans. Like what?
Yeah, violent football fans. They will fight. When I worked with Whole Foods, I knew a guy who was from Michigan. And he said as like a 10-year-old, he went to a Michigan-Ohio game and the Ohio people poured beer on him.
Yeah.
A 10-year-old, like a child.
They have thrown glass bottles with urine at Michigan fans. And it's kind of like known that like if you have Michigan plates in Ohio, you might get pulled over just for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
kind of embarrassing as like humanity, right?
It
like
is embarrassing. Like I hate football. I didn't even apply to Ohio State. I went to like a college that had no football team and no Greek life. Like that's what I wanted because I grew up in Ohio. And but yeah, so I was like, but I hear you on that sports thing of like, you know, I got every college football season, my ex-husband would have to like again tell me the rules of football because there's so many damn rules.
Yeah.
I'd like relearn it every season, but I would get really into the rivalries. Like because I enjoy sport, I enjoy competition.
Yeah.
I like that. So I would get really into the rivalries and like cheer along and all that, even though I didn't really care, it was just like,
It was fun. Yeah.
It was fun to get to know like the history behind the rivalries and like that sort of thing. So yeah, it was interesting. Yeah. But now I don't watch it. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel that. I think there's something to be said. I mean, there's a lot of, people that they can see the bright side of it, right? Like the sport and stuff. And there are plenty of people out there who are decent human beings, but that is the stuff that always ends up on TV, right? Like soccer team loses and they ride it at the streets. And like, if your car was out there, it got flipped and you're like, what?
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, we lost our soccer game. Like, what did you think we were going to do?
I remember one time my childhood friend went to Ohio State. I remember one time she called me up on like a Sunday. She was like, oh yeah, yesterday after the game, it was so crazy. There were like, we were flipping over cars and like the police were out with like tear gas and stuff. And I was like, didn't you win? She's like, yeah, we won. It was like, they do it even when they win.
Yeah, they do it either way. It's insanity.
Crazy.
Oh man.
Yeah.
I just picture them being like, yeah, I saved up my money. I bought a flamethrower. We've been really excited. What's great is that
win or lose.
I'm going to use this flamethrower, guys. And nobody's like, we should stop them, right? Like we should take the flamethrower away from. They're like, let's let this play out. This could be good for TikTok. I don't know. I mean,
this could be the kind of school culture we want to cultivate. This might be
right.
Yeah.
I think it's an interesting point because it's like the extreme of that success culture just personified into sports of like, we got to win and we're going to win all the time. And we'll destroy things either way. Like it's a crazy, I have a friend who says extremists ruin everything. And that's kind of what it is there. Yeah. Like there's plenty of sports fans that can kind of sit in the middle, just enjoy the game for what it is. And then there's that other end of our society and kind of culture in America itself, where they have to push it so far. It's like they bleed their team colors, which I just can't.
Yeah. And then you don't have the coping mechanisms to deal with when you lose or when you fail, right?
Exactly.
You're not really taught how to do that, right?
Yeah. No public school teaches that.
Yeah. And like I think that's like a big like hope I have for my book. Like someone I interviewed for the book pointed out that in her own life, like and I think in most of our lives, people just don't talk about times when they quit or times when they fail. I mean, I hate to equate quitting with failure, right? But people don't disclose those things, where people just like trumpet like when they've succeeded. And so like she was saying, like, I didn't really have any models or examples to look up to when it came to like quitting as a choice. And so I just kept going and going and going. And she suffered a great deal in her life for it, and she really like was sad she didn't have those examples. And so like my hope is that like, in the 19 happy quitter stories in the book, that people will have like examples of what it looks like to choose yourself, right? Or choose your value, or choose something that often is against like societal expectations, cultural expectations, family expectations, and that you can be really happy making that decision still.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, definitely like normalizing it is the biggest thing, because people just don't, there's no movie that I can think of someone where the main character quit and it was a good thing that led them to like, a better path. So in book form, I agree. I think it'll reach the right people. They'll see that title and be like, that resonates with me, because I don't know what that means yet. And I need to like read this and figure it out.
Yeah.
So I wanted to circle back to something you said earlier, that so the whole thing of like, hey, I'm here to work hard and do my best. Tell me how high to jump and I'll do it. And then you do it and they go, actually what we really wanted you to do, like if you read between the lines, it's go like run 10 blocks that way. And you're like, that's not the same thing of what you said. And Megan and I have talked about that, where the dangling carrot always ends up getting yanked up higher and higher and higher, right? And what's strange to me is that I've worked several jobs where, it's for a corporation, whatever. And there's always that person that comes in and they work maybe not even a full shift. And they're like, yeah, this isn't for me. Like during the interview, it seemed like it was going to be this. It's not, I'm out. And nobody goes like, huh, like maybe this place isn't a place worth working at.
Yeah.
Always like, oh, well, he couldn't hack it. Right.
Yeah.
And it was never like, I never took the time to go, maybe something's wrong here that I'm not aware of. Like maybe I'm just a glutton for punishment, and so
a lot of faith in systems and institutions to like know the way.
Yeah.
And like, I don't want to imply that I'm like some anti-government person. I believe in government, and so I believe in that system, but like it's exactly that, I was talking to someone not that long ago and they were like, yeah, like, what do you say to people who like might have quit a bunch of jobs and their resume looks like they bounced around a lot? How should they explain that to an interviewer who asks about that? And I'm like, well, that interviewer is not being a good interviewer, because if you're interviewing someone who you've already qualified as qualified because you're interviewing them, the question shouldn't be like, why did you quit all those jobs? The question should be like, why weren't those the right places for you? Because it's like, what's the deeper thing that's going on there is about those organizations, and why couldn't they keep that person who you are now interviewing? I think that's like a real question. But we always blame the individual, right? We blame them instead of like the context and the situation. And, that's like a big part of the book where it's like people are quitting these things that from the outside seemed so good and so perfect, and so I hope people, when they're on the receiving end of someone's quitting story, instead of jumping to the like pity and like, oh my God, what happened? Instead just be like, wow, that must have been worth it. If you're willing to quit that, it must have been really worth it. And you did a brave thing to give up what seems like so much, and to kind of lead with that kind of ethos of like, just what it takes to kind of give up something that looks like it's so good on the outside.
Yeah, I think that really, it resonates with me because I've talked about it on this podcast before. I had a job straight out of college that was like the best job on paper that I could have. It was a really good company, well known. They really had a way to sucker in like college students with a great package. It's like the most you've ever made. You get a bonus. And I felt like I really had to stick it out and make it work. But that job slowly like killed me and sucked everything out of me. I had no time for a personal life, no balance. I learned to like not even like the job itself. It was kind of just painful. And I kept forcing myself, like, I just need to make it to this X amount of time, a little bit longer, because I need this on my resume. And then finally, when it came up to a year, I literally quit like a week before my year because I couldn't do it anymore. But it wasn't, like you said, I didn't just quit. I didn't have no plan. I had something lined up that was a good move. But like you said earlier, it was more of a lateral move. I wasn't making any more money. It wasn't any kind of benefit like that. But I've been there ever since, and I love it. And it's a way better balance. But it is terrifying, especially I think the younger generation. You feel like once you have a good job, you got to hold on to it.
Yeah, you feel like I should love this, and you blame yourself for not loving this thing that you've been told you should love.
Exactly. And then anyone older than you,
reasons, right? Or for reasons that aren't resonant for you. Yeah.
Exactly. And anyone older than you is kind of pushing that you got to stick it out, you got to work harder.
And that's because they are fearful.
Yeah.
That's another big part of the book. It's like, well, not only whose life are you living your life for, but whose fears are you living your life based on?
Yeah.
And sometimes your parents' fears for you, your teacher's fears for you aren't your fears for yourself, And
definitely.
It's a strange thing to think about.
Because
I just think it's interesting, and I think you would agree with me, is that your life will really change as an individual once you start taking as much responsibility as you can for the things in your life, right? Because like I had a period in my life when I was younger where, oh, well, this is happening to me because of this. Like it's always the environment's fault or other people's fault or the corporation I'm working at or whatever it is. And the more responsibility I take on about my well-being and my circumstance, like, you know, you don't have to blame things. You can just go, okay, I'm going to take extreme ownership and go, all right, I don't like this. It's my job to fix it. Right.
Yeah.
Which is difficult because it's easy to say out loud, but then when you go to like do that in action, you're like, oh, now I have to.
And because you've been talking a lot about quitting in the context of jobs, you know, I mean, like the book has a section on quitting jobs and then sections on other things in life that you quit. But I definitely want to also point out that like being able to quit a job or quit a relationship involves a lot of privilege too, you know, like not everyone can make that choice, you know. Like I think back to the jobs that I quit, you know, and it was like I knew I would be employable again, you know, or like I knew I could pay for Cobra for a few months, you know, or just like things like that, you know. And so definitely want to acknowledge that like not everyone has like equal ability to make those choices. But what stands out for me in acknowledging that is that even the most privileged among us are victims of this like stigma and shame around quitting, you know, like you don't see like super privileged people making those decisions for themselves, you know. You still see people staying in jobs they hate for their whole careers, so they think they need to, you know, when they could have other choices they don't avail themselves of. So I think that's just how powerful the stigma and the shame is that, you know, we've created in society.
It's pretty wild, and I'm hoping your book will help shift all of us into a better direction. Which, speaking of, really quick, if you don't mind, if I wanted to find your book, where could I find it?
Oh, thank you for asking. Well, it is available on Amazon in ebook and paperback format, and the hardcover should be coming out end of September.
Nice.
And if you like to support small businesses and small bookstores like I do, you can also find the book at bookshop.org.
Perfect.
There you go.
And if anyone would like a signed copy, I'm so happy. Just email me directly, and I can send you a signed copy too.
I'm 100% going to take you up on. There's no hesitation there. No, that would be wonderful, and I appreciate that. So one thing I would like to do, and you can use this however you would like, but do you? I usually towards the end like to ask the question of, do you have anything that you would like to leave our listeners with? Right? Maybe some advice or just maybe like hope. I don't know. Right?
Gosh, I feel like we talked a lot about good nuggety things. I would say, you know, something I found myself saying a lot to people in their 20s and 30s when I kind of advised them on career transitions they were thinking of making, and it found its way into the book, quite obviously. But I would just say, you know, it's a risk if you do, and it's a risk if you don't. When it comes to change or quitting or anything like that, you know, I think part of the societal stigma we've inherited is that we assume staying put and not making a choice is inherently less risky. But we don't know that. We just don't know that, right? And so if you can view both choices as equal in risk, you know, like, what would you do?
Yeah.
That's good.
It's a really good
That was
point.
a really good one. What's great is I feel like I need to like write that on a note card and then like as a reminder,
You
just
could
be like,
put it on a pillow.
Yes.
See a very long quote on a pillow.
We'll change the stigma of like the old cross-stitched pillows and put stuff on there that's like holy moly, like change somebody's life.
Lots of
right?
swear words. Yeah.
Oh yeah, right. And like you can be like censor some of them but not censor other ones and just confuse people. They'll be like, what's the point? Like I don't they're all just words, people. That's the reality. I do want to say, like, we really enjoyed having you here today. This was a really fun conversation, and I very much am excited to read the book as well. So on our outro, we usually talk about social media and stuff. Do you have like a main social media that you highly recommend, like people looking for you should utilize?
Yeah. Well, if you want to look for me personally, I would definitely recommend, it's so nerdy, but follow me on LinkedIn. That's where I'm pretty active on all things related to innovation and creativity, failure and quitting. You can also find me on Instagram, just at Coonoor Behal. And the book has an Instagram as well. So, and that is at I quit book. Yeah.
Perfect. Awesome. And now we're gonna shout out our.
Please.
I think
Our turn.
we have like one social media.
Wait, can I ask you? Okay, so Megan and Sam, where can we find you on social media?
Oh, look at that transition.
Well, if you go to Facebook, you'll find in 2008 I.
Oh my gosh.
Sam, where's your GeoCities page? We want to go to your GeoCities page and your MySpace page.
His MySpace is somewhere out there.
If you guys find it, please let me know because I've been searching for it.
You've lost it.
It's been lost and I don't know where it went, guys.
I really miss Friendster.
I forgot about Friendster.
Loved Friendster when it was a thing. Yeah. Anyway, sorry. Where can we find you, Megan?
Sadly on Facebook. We have Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, all under Friends of Failure. Just give us a follow, and we put little clips and content on there as well. You also rate and subscribe us. Let us know what you think. Give us some feedback. Let us know if we're terrible or not. And then our favorite part is we ask you guys to send in your own failures. So you can email these to friendsoffailurepodcast@gmail.com, or you can call in to our voicemail box that we've named Ethel at 916-304-3545. And these can be, short little stories about a time you failed personally, or a lesson or something that kind of taught you. It can be funny, it can be stupid, it can be meaningful, whatever you want. And it can also be anonymous. So if you don't want to put a name to it, we are fine with not shouting that out. We'll make up a name for you.
Yeah. And I want to add to that of, if you guys are listening, it can be uncomfortable to talk about your failures, especially if you have this notion of, oh man, it's going to be shared with people. But if no one knows that it's you, right? If it's anonymous, like, what does it matter? Like, it's a good exercise to just be uncomfortable and grow, right? Awesome. Yeah, I'm gonna just start calling the number all the time now and just leaving all sorts of little tidbits, right?
I'm just
awesome.
gonna call the number and just have it on throughout my entire day.
Oh gosh.
Just butt dial us, yeah.
Failures throughout my day.
Just capture everything live.
Stub your toe, just screaming bloody murder, right?
Yeah.
Actually, that's not a bad idea. We'll see what happens. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. And I would like to leave you with just remember, life is happening for you, not to you. So go out there and fail.
If it's not I'm stronger than you, it's I'm wiser than you, I'm more loving than you, I'm more tolerant than you, I'm more sophisticated than you. It doesn't matter what it is, but this constant competition is going on. This is the secret. This is the secret. You can't make a mistake.